To begin, just a word or two on the diversity industrial complex. So the firefighters are the arsonists in this case, and that is what I propose. And so I would like to begin with a quote from Thomas Sowell regarding the welfare state. And I quote, "It is now only within our own time that we suddenly see this inevitable tragedy, which the welfare system says it's going to rush in to solve, but which it is itself a part of." So in this sense, he was characterizing the welfare system as this rescue net, but the rescue net was actually the problem as well as the solution. And I would purport to you that the same is true of this new class of essentially professional grifters, as I call them, with their postmodern, neo-Marxist PhDs that have been done under the auspices of autoethnographies, thereby rubber stamp validating their subjective perspective, which, as we know, pertaining to arguments and to reality and fruitful discussions of such things, one's personal subjective experiences have essentially no bearing on that discussion, right? So, ruling all of those unusual PhDs, which really emerged in the early 90s, and I have an entire video discussing that, I want to step off of the diversity industrial complex here and take a closer look at the Florida bill. Of course, I'm referring to Florida House Bill 1557, also known as, right, the Parental Rights in Education Bill. Right, you were going to say that, right? Probably not. You were probably going to say the Don't Say Gay bill, which the word gay, I've read the bill. It's about 7 pages. It doesn't appear anywhere in the bill. And essentially the bill does a couple of things, though it quantifies it. Basically, it forbids discussion of gender identity or sexual orientation to grades kindergarten through 3rd grade. And it also prevents the school from withholding the release of information to parents. And what that sounded like to me in layman's terms was basically the school is not allowed to keep secret if the child has an identity that is inconsistent with the one that he presents at home. And I'm paraphrasing the bill, and I don't speak for the bill or on behalf of any of the authors. And so that was my layman's understanding or takeaway of it. It was essentially those 2 points. Forbids the discussion and also forbids the school from preventing release of information in whatever form that would be. So nowhere in the bill does it have the word gay. It's not about not allowing people to have discussions. It's essentially about telling K through 12 teachers that you aren't qualified to talk about issues of gender and sexual identity to kids. What makes you think for a second that you are? I mean, I'm flattered that as a college instructor, people would think that since I have a narrow expertise in one area, say communication and speech, that means I'm an expert in all areas. You know, I could show you a personal IRA that I've managed myself if you needed some evidence that I'm not an expert in all areas. I could give you plenty of examples of things that I can't do very well or that I need to hire people to do. The fact that I might be able to perform well in one field that I've studied is by no means evidence that I could be considered an expert in another area. So to begin with, why? 2 questions, and one would be, what qualifies K through 3rd grade teachers, or K through 12, let's say, as experts in gender or race? They're also race referees now, if you haven't noticed. They're the ones that they have to step in the middle the same way that the welfare state rushes in to solve the problem. So what qualifies them as experts? They have no formal training in such thing. To my knowledge, there are no formal programs that exist or have been created. And so what's going on with the freelancing here? I might teach a journalism class, And perhaps I know a thing or two about auto body. Maybe I'm an enthusiast. Maybe I have a 67 Camaro in my garage that I've restored. Probably not. But let's say that I did. It wouldn't be up to me to go into my journalism class and start giving lessons on auto body. That's not what I was hired to do. That's not my expertise. And to my second point here, that's not a lesson. It has nothing to do with, it's not reading, it's not mathematics, it's not science, it isn't even any of these things that you might expect to see in kindergarten through third grade, for example. I don't know, lessons about diversity, inclusion, equity. Yeah, that was the original agenda. And now we've sort of branched off into this neverland of gender identities and this really brazen attitude by some of these teachers. And you can see a lot of them on Libs of TikTok, I think does an excellent example of portraying some of them. Now, whether that's indicative of a slice of these teachers across the nation, or it's just a quirky handful of people that a person was able to assemble, that question is unanswered. It's unclear which is the case. But you can certainly see some grotesque examples there where we're essentially looking at what I would suggest to you are narcissists. And what we've done by encouraging this victim class and by quantifying the victim class into this oppression Olympics where everyone's competing to see who is more oppressed, what we've essentially done is in trying to reach the most limited, narrow identities out there, we've also enabled a large swath of narcissists that we've probably also created these narcissists, but we've not only created them, we've enabled them to fill this void now where they can come in and they can pose as having a different identity, or they can pose as being an oppressed minority of some kind, or they can just be a postmodern neo-Marxist and they can purport that they're going to impose their language on you in a conversation. And so this is really narcissism that we're looking at. I think that the overwhelming majority of these social justice types, these out-of-control kids, the kind that stand in the lobby at the University of Buffalo chanting, "No justice, no peace," when Alan West is giving a speech and the title of it is "America is not racist." Those types, that's what I'm talking about. So the radicalization of those people has created this problem in the schools. What are we essentially talking about here when we're talking about this Florida bill? What is at issue? I would assert that at issue here is the idea that your subjective sense of self ought to govern all interactions and conversations with other people. I mean, that is fundamentally what's at the root of this. Whether it is an element of transgender ideology or it is some tenet of the new sexual identities or these emerging classes and definition and words and terms that everyone is expected to learn to use in order to demonstrate their politeness or perhaps in order to demonstrate their loyalty to the DIE industry, one or the other. By the way, an $8 billion a year industry in the United States. So we're certainly throwing a lot of money at this problem, aren't we? Now, I think from the point where we can identify large groups of these people as narcissists, we can begin to discredit large swaths of this. And so basically, I would like to see eliminated the non-organic activists. So a lot of these programs that are springing up in universities around the country, and I've done a video on this, where now you can get a bachelor's degree in activism. I mean, does anyone suppose for a second that these colleges and universities are sort of just neutrally training people in the art of activism. And whether they go on to be transgender activists, let's say, or anti-abortion activists, it makes no difference to the university or the college. They're totally neutral. There's no politics in it at all. They're not nudging one way or the other. They expect quantities from both groups, right? Of course not. What a ridiculous and insane idea. And even if you were going to put out equal amounts of both, and so in some way it would be politically neutral for all appearances, you wouldn't be able to escape the fact that there's nothing organic about it. So I shouldn't be a 20-year-old kid in a high school looking for a degree program to get into at the university that I want to attend and just happen to stumble onto, hey, activism. And somewhere at the end of my degree, I decide, you know what, I'd like to take it in this direction. That's really not quite the way that I want to see people motivated to go into activism. I'd rather see some genuine victimization. Someone who can speak to an issue as someone who's been pulled through the ringer unfairly, unjustly, and who can actually represent that position. That's who our authorities ought to be when it comes to activism, not someone with a college degree and a lot of college debt that they amassed. I think if you take a look at the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychology 5, you can see that a lot of the traits that are required, personality traits, in order to define this disorder that I'm talking about, it's very obvious here. So when you look at narcissist personality disorder, here are the criteria. So first of all, significant impairments in personality functioning manifest by identity, excessive reference to others for self-definition and self-esteem regulation, exaggerated self-appraisal, may be inflated or deflated, or vacillate between extremes. Emotional regulation mirrors fluctuations in self-esteem. Self-direction. Goal setting is based on gaining approval from others. Personal standards are unreasonably high in order to see oneself as exceptional, or too low based on a sense of entitlement, often unaware of own motivations, and impairments in personal functioning. And this could be one or the other. Empathy, impaired ability to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. I demand that you use my language when you speak to me. Intimacy, relationships largely superficial and exist to serve self-esteem regulation. So you see groups of people beginning to merge together and form under these silly auspices like protesting Allen West at the University of Buffalo, et cetera, et cetera. Pathological personality traits in the following domain: antagonism, characterized by grandiosity, attention-seeking. I mean, I could go on, but I would recommend that everyone have a look at the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder, because I think that what you can begin to see in some of this mess we've created in society is that we have created the conditions for and invited large groups of these narcissistic type personalities to come and occupy these new identities. I mean, we've given them zero direction in high school, and then they sort of land in college, and then here they are, and that's when the craziness starts. Everyone should notice that there isn't a high school in America where there's a riot or there's some contentious issue or the students rebel and the teachers are cornered and they're yelling at them. This insanity only occurs at American colleges and universities, never at high schools. So let me ask you this question. How is it that the high schools are doing such a terrific job of keeping things under control and keeping everyone maintained and well-ordered and organized in class, and suddenly when they hit the universities, everything goes crazy. Everybody's racist. Everything has to be complained about. How do you go from like a flawless high school where there are no complaints and no problems, you're not even exposed to any, but the minute you land in university, everybody else is a racist or a bigot? How does that happen? It's kind of strange, isn't it? You wouldn't expect to see one group behave one way in one situation and then get into a different situation and behave completely different in some irrational manner. And so that is evidence, at least in part, of some of that insanity. So I think I'm going to stop there. This is certainly enough for now. Just a little bit about the diversity industrial complex, also as it relates to the Florida House bill, parental rights in education, etc., and some additional details for you at the end. So I will catch up with you on the next video. Take care.